Thank you very much. So I'm excited to be with you all here today. And my topic of today's presentation will be customer-centric RevOps, improving internal and external customer experience to drive sustainable revenue. So maybe before I begin, I would like to introduce myself shortly. I'm a revenue operations advisor with 7 years of experience in working with SaaS companies at different stages of growth. Both as an advisor and manager, I help to build effective RevOps functions and go-to-market strategies. And I would like to kick off my today presentation with an insightful and thought-provoking quote from Kate Zabriskie. "The customer's perception is your reality." I'm sure many of you have heard the term customer perception before, but have you ever considered how deeply connected it is with the reality in which you are building your revenue engine? We live in the age of the customer, a world where businesses no longer share the reality where they operate in, a world where customers, their experiences are defining whether you are generating revenue or your revenue is declining. So the question is, are we listening to our customers? Are we adapting our revenue engines through the lens of customer perception? Or do we stick to our old habits and ignore the voice of the customer? Today, I would like to speak a bit about this and explore customer-centric RevOps, uncover how revenue operations can take the lead in not only understanding, but in shaping customer experiences. So first, let's take a look at the agenda. In today's presentation, we'll cover 4 topics: common misconceptions about customer centricity, 3 pillars of customer centricity being the perspective, focus, and impact. And then we'll see how RevOps can become a strategic and practical enabler of customer centricity. In the end, we'll look also at the real-life example of HubSpot, a company with a truly customer-centric strategy, which can be a great inspiration for us all. At the end, if we'll have time, we'll have also some 5 minutes for Q&A session. So before we dive into what customer centricity is, let's first talk about what it isn't. There are many misconceptions about what does it mean to be customer-centric, and I'm sure many of you have come across this term, but more like a buzzword. Quoting Oji Ray, a vice president at Gartner who is responsible for areas related to customer experience, in his experience, there is no term less understood than customer-centric. So let's take a look at what customer centricity is not. Customer centricity is not just a phrase in a company value statement that you put on a wall. It is a company culture and focus reflected in its actions. It is also not a sole responsibility of the customer success or customer service team, but a responsibility of the entire company, starting from your C-level, from managers and individual contributors. To be customer-centric, you also don't need to give equal attention to every single customer. You need a proper customer segmentation and wise allocation of your limited time and resources. Customer centricity doesn't also mean to blindly implement every feature request coming from your customers. It is actually about creating mutual value for your customers in a way that creates value also for your business. And last but not least, we live in the age where there is a lot of data, we're gathering data, and as RevOps professionals, we often talk a lot about gathering and analyzing data, but customer centricity doesn't mean gathering big amounts of data. It's about using customer data and insights to improve customer experience and to deliver customer impact. Now that we've dealt with the common misconceptions about customer centricity, let's explore the 3 pillars that are needed to build a truly customer-centric organization: perspective, focus, and impact. To start with the customer perspective, let's think of it as 2 different lenses through which you can view your business. The first lens is the function out perspective, which tends to focus on internal objectives, internal processes, metrics, and preferences of your internal teams. The second lens is the customer in perspective. This is where you look at the business through the eyes of your customers, taking into account their goals, their needs, their pain points, and their preferences. As operators, as people working in revenue operations, we often tend to take the function out perspective. We think and talk a lot about internal KPIs, processes, and tools. But in order to drive customer centricity as RevOps, we need to change our point of view. And what does it mean in practice? Let's walk through an example. If, as a RevOps leader, your CEO asks you, how can we grow revenue this year? What comes first to your mind? Maybe we need to hire more salespeople, or we need better target leads, or maybe we need a more effective sales process. Many internal discussions about improving business results look like this, but we need to see that this is all from a function out perspective. What if instead you would take a customer in perspective and begin with asking the following questions? What matters most to our customers? What are their challenges and needs in achieving their goals? And how we as a company and internal teams can help them to achieve what matters most to them. As you can see, it is a shift in perspective. It is about first understanding how you can bring most value to your customers, and only then planning your internal actions and operations around those things. I really like the quote from Jaco van der Kooi, whom we had the privilege to listen to yesterday, which I believe really fits well into this part. It says, your job is not to sell, but to help your customers buy. In other words, selling is about buying. We could call this statement a customer in perspective to doing sales. In a similar way, when talking about customer in perspective to doing revenue operations, we can say that revenue is about customers. Let's pause here for a second and think about it. Where does the revenue come from in the first place? It comes from your customers. So if there are no customers, it means there is no revenue. A change in perspective helps us to realize that customers are the source of our revenue. In other words, that customers come first, then the revenue. That's why revenue should be viewed not just as financial targets, but as a measure of the impact you deliver to your customers. Okay, so we know that the right perspective is the first step to becoming a more customer-centric company, but it is not enough. What we need next is customer focus. And customer focus goes beyond the surface level of just knowing and understanding your customers and their needs. It's about making sure that your company priorities and goals are really in tune, are aligned with what customers care about. To quote Oji Ray again from Gartner, real customer centricity is challenging to achieve, demands consideration of priorities, goals, and policies, and requires leaders to model behaviors. I'd like to highlight the last part of this sentence, that in order to make something a true priority for the organization, it is crucial to model behaviors from the top. As revenue leaders, we often focus on metrics and numbers. However, a simple change, a shift in perspective in how we are talking internally can change the perspective of the entire company. For example, when you are planning the next quarter with the revenue team, instead of asking, how can we hit our revenue targets next quarter, you can ask, how can we positively impact our customers to drive growth? You should not underestimate your role as a leader in driving customer centricity. When revenue leaders put customers first in discussions regarding internal priorities and goals, you strengthen the focus on customer-centric approach across the entire company. The last thing you need to become really customer-centric is customer impact. We've all seen organizations where customer centricity is a term that is thrown around, but it's actually not implemented in a practical way in day-to-day operations. For customer centricity to become practical, it needs to become a part of operations and drive actions that are delivering impact to your customers, not only once, but on a regular basis. Impact can be defined as something you are providing to your customers they didn't have before engaging with you, or that they achieve more quickly by working with you. Customer impact is especially crucial for SaaS businesses. It's about the sustainable revenue growth, and in recurring revenue models, sustainable revenue growth depends on regular impact delivered to customers. It requires focus on customer retention and expansion, not only on new clients acquisition. On this slide, we can see a recurring revenue framework from Winning by Design called the Bowtie. I think many of you are familiar with it. The left side of it covers new clients acquisition, so the stages that are coming from marketing, sales, to closing the deal. But this bowtie model is putting the equal focus also on the right side, which is about retention and expansion of your existing customer base. As you can see, there is a big loop on the right side called the growth loop. It visualizes that in the subscription-based business model, recurring revenue is the result of recurring impact. Why? Because to keep people coming to you to use your product and pay for it on a regular basis, they also need to get impact in return on a regular basis. If you aren't delivering impact, keeping and growing your customer base will be highly challenging, and you will struggle with your recurring revenue results. So we can say that recurring impact results in recurring revenue. To summarize what we've covered so far, revenue generation in its core is not just about closing more deals. It is about taking the customer perspective to learn what really matters to your customers, then focusing on their needs and impact they want to achieve, and helping customers to achieve this impact on a day-to-day basis. And this is where revenue operations comes in. Let's now talk about how RevOps can be the enabler of customer centricity in a practical way. By being a central function that drives strategic alignment and operational improvements across all of the customer-facing teams, RevOps is a perfect candidate to lead customer-centric efforts within the organization. Customer-centric RevOps could be defined as a strategic process of bringing customer perspective into the business, prioritizing focus on customer impact, and taking actions to deliver this impact in day-to-day operations. Before diving into how revenue operations can drive customer centricity in a practical way, let's first consider one more important matter about RevOps. Revenue operations is quite a unique business team and function because it has two types of customers. It has the internal customers, meaning the internal teams it supports with its work, and external customers, which we can define as end buyers of company products and services. It is very important to grasp this idea because understanding this duality of RevOps customers is the first step to understand how RevOps can drive customer centricity in a practical way. Let's unpack this a little. When we think of internal customers, we are talking about the various teams that RevOps is supporting. In most cases, it is marketing, sales, and customer success, but sometimes also other internal teams like finance or product, R&D. These teams need to be equipped and empowered to serve external customers. RevOps can streamline processes, manage data, provide insights, and create an environment where these internal teams can be most effective and best serve the external customers. When it comes to external customers, these are the people who actually buy your products and services. These are the end users. They're the reason your business exists. So RevOps should really focus on ensuring that their entire journey throughout the buying process is smooth and that their experience with the company, your products and services is exceptional. What's important is that in serving both the internal and external customers, the ultimate goal of RevOps remains the same. It is about creating value and impact for the customer. Let's visualize this. Imagine two circles, one representing the company, internal customers, and the other representing buyers, external customers. Now think of customer centricity as the area where these two circles overlap. It is the area where collaboration between company and buyers generates mutual value. The greater the overlap, the higher the customer centricity. We can call the degree of overlap between these two circles the degree of customer centricity. And RevOps can actually expand this area of overlap by doing several things. By facilitating collaboration between the company and buyers, which can include initiatives like customer feedback loops, integrating customer insights into internal decision-making. By aligning the company goals and processes with customer needs, it is ensuring that internal focus and its operations are aligned with what is valuable for the customer. And it can also empower buyers through knowledge sharing and support so that they have tools and information they need to make the most, that will help them to make the most out of the products and services that you provide. By doing this, revenue operations not only bridges the gap between internal and external customers, but also makes the organization more adaptable and successful in the market. Now let's talk about the practical steps in which RevOps can become an enabler of a customer-centric approach. Let's call it the customer-centric RevOps playbook. The first thing you need to do is to map your customer journey. It is a fundamental first step to bring customer perspective into the business and align the customer-facing teams. RevOps should take the lead in coordinating efforts to map the customer journey, but it's crucial that all of the business functions, all of the customer-facing functions are actively involved in the process of creating it, then updating it on a regular basis. Before we move to phase 2, let's first cover the 4 key steps you need to follow to build a successful customer journey map. Step 1 is to map all of the customer touchpoints with your company. When mapping the customer journey, we might be tempted to dive and jump straight into internal processes, internal metrics, handovers, systems. But it is critical that we stop ourselves for a minute and think from the customer in perspective, as we discussed before. It is to understand how customers are interacting with you. Why? Because knowing how your customers interact with you is the foundation based on which you can build a solid internal setup that supports those interactions. So first you need to identify all of the touch points where your customers interact with you. It can be scrolling through your social media, browsing your website, dropping an email, or having an in-person meeting. And then when you have all of this mapped, in step 2, you should describe customers' emotions, motivations, and preferences. Again, it's all about bringing that customer in perspective into your business. At each touch point, you need to discover what's going on in the customer's mind. Are they excited or confused? What is driving them to actually contact you? Is it a search for information, a need for help, or a desire to purchase? And what are their preferences? Is there any particular style of communication they like, or any preference towards how they would like to be approached by you as the company? This two first points are the core of your customer journey map. They are helping you to understand the customer in perspective. Then only in point 3, you should start to bring in your internal landscape. This includes how your teams react to customer touchpoints, all the processes that are triggered, handovers between department, metrics that matter, data flows, and systems that are being used. This layer gives you insights into the operational side of the things and helps you identify where you can make improvements to serve your customers better. The last thing to remember about it is to keep your map fresh. A customer journey is not a one-time document. It is a living tool that needs to be updated on a regular basis by all of the teams. Customer needs and the market are constantly changing, and so should your map. RevOps needs to ensure that it is reviewed and updated on a regular basis, and that the inputs are gathered from all relevant departments, but also directly from your customers. When you have the customer journey mapped out, you can begin to see where you can make improvements or design a better customer experience. And that's where phase 2 kicks in. It consists of 2 simultaneous discovery processes. The first one focuses on analyzing the customer journey and identifying the gaps in their experience. Here we need to look for instances of things where customers may face challenges or express dissatisfactions. This could be points of friction where customers might drop off the journey or become less engaged. Through a combination of customer feedback, data analytics, and insights, RevOps is enabling the discovery of those gaps and understanding their underlying causes. But simultaneously, it is also vital to scan the journey for opportunities to elevate customer impact, so to strengthen it. This involves examining touchpoints where your products or service could bring more significant value to your customers, or where the customer engagement could be deepened between you and the customer. The key here is to look for customer experience that is not only seamless and frictionless, but the one that consistently exceeds customer expectation. Finally, in order to make it practical, we need to have a well thought out plan. This is where the strategic RevOps roadmaps comes into play. And RevOps must develop a roadmap that outlines the key initiatives with the customer in focus. These are the initiatives that improve customer experience and elevate customer impact. This involves setting clear objectives, key results, allocating resources, and continuously monitoring progress. The roadmap has to be aligned with customer needs and company goals. By following this playbook, RevOps can contribute to increasing customer satisfaction and impact customers on a regular basis. Ultimately, it leads to sustainable revenue growth through higher retention and expansion of your customer base. So moving to the last part of this presentation, let's see how HubSpot executes its customer-centric strategy with the help of revenue operations in practice. I believe this example can be an inspiration for many companies, and I believe many of you are familiar of what HubSpot is doing. HubSpot is a CRM company providing system to many companies globally, and is one of the fastest developing company in the world right now. And what we can see that HubSpot adapted something they called a flywheel model, which is a part and the core of their customer-centric strategy. To quote the company itself, the flywheel is a model adapted by HubSpot to explain the momentum You gain when you align your entire organization around delivering a remarkable customer experience. It presents a fresh take on business dynamics. Rather than envisioning a business as a funnel with leads coming on the top and customers coming out in the bottom, HubSpot looks at their business as a spinning circle. In a traditional sales and marketing funnels, which you might be familiar from the left, customers are often an afterthought. Whereas in the flywheel, customers are the first thought. They are the center of company's focus. The flywheel, it revolves around three key stages. Here we can see on the top the attraction of prospects through valuable content and resources. Then we have the engagement with prospects to convert them into customers. And we have also a delight phase where customers satisfied with your experience effectively become brand ambassadors. And they are strengthening the word of mouth, referring your company to other companies. Keeping this wheel spinning involves balancing two critical elements. It's called force and friction. Force is any program or strategy that you implement or plan to accelerate the flywheel, and friction is what slows it down. It is the gaps and inefficiencies such as long waiting time from support, difficulty to find something on your website, but also internal friction within your company. It is important here to understand that friction can happen both internally and externally. So it is not only about the things your end buyers see, but also the things that they don't see, but that RevOps see within your company. Here again, RevOps can impact not only the external, but also the internal customer experience and effectiveness of internal operations. So now let's see how HubSpot puts customer centricity into life with 4 key practices aimed at making the voice of the customers, as they call it, louder across the company. And firstly, HubSpot has introduced a specialized internal team that they call the voice of the customer, which is a part of the revenue operations team. Its primary mission is to amplify customers' perspectives and needs throughout the entire company. Secondly, in order to gain a deeper first-hand understanding of customers, HubSpot involves key stakeholders and teams in shadowing customer support and sales calls. This helps them to gain first-hand knowledge and sentiments, about challenges, about opportunities that their customers are facing. So this allows you to understand customers from the customer in perspective, not the function out. The third thing that HubSpot is doing is using various mechanisms to gather customer feedback on a regular basis. This is a Net Promoter Score, NPS, Customer Ideas Forum, and Customers Roadblocks portal. Thanks to this, it's bringing in the customer feedback and perspective. And last but not least, once a month, all of HubSpot executives and RevOps leaders gather together to discuss customer challenges, company shortages, and customer-related opportunities that should be prioritized. This helps to constantly refocus the company on the customer and make sure that HubSpot leadership is aligned on how to best serve their customers. So we can see here customer perspective, customer focus, and focus on driving customer impact. I hope that these examples and insights were useful and that they will inspire you to lead customer-centric approach also in your companies. And to summarize this entire presentation, I'd like to once again highlight these 3 simple truths: that customers come first, then the revenue. Therefore, revenue is about customers. And that's why revenue operations should be customer-centric. Thank you for being with me today. And now I believe we can move to the questions.